The South African healthcare system is fraught with many challenges, especially in the public sector. Overcrowding in hospitals, lack of resources, a shortage of skilled doctors, to name but a few. But a less obvious threat has now reached a tipping point.
The rate of litigation and the amounts have just exploded, in our faces. So it is a crisis for the country, a very serious crisis.
Medical litigation is when a doctor or hospital is sued by a patient if something goes wrong during their treatment. Obstetricians and gynecologists are said to be some of the hardest hit.
Specialist gynecologists who also gave evidence in court said that there was 100% chance of Pamela Daweti surviving, and it's only due to the doctor's mismanagement of the whole process and malpractice that she ended up being a victim.
So serious is the problem that, it's reported, South Africa runs the very real risk of having no private practice obstetricians by the year 2020. Some doctors have simply stopped specializing in certain areas because of the high insurance rates they pay in the event that they are sued. But in the end, who suffers?
The question that we need to ask is, who's actually going to be delivering our grandchildren in the future if we don't have obstetricians practicing as obstetricians in the private sector?
In September last year, this gynecologist and obstetrician, Dr. Dani van der Walt, was found guilty of culpable homicide. After a grueling 11-year battle for justice, the family of his victim, 22-year-old Pamela Daweti, could finally get some closure.
Pamela was vibrant, enthusiastic, and jolly, and an extrovert. And she was a very, very close friend to her mother. And she was looking forward to also having her own daughter and being a mother as well.
On the evening of 11 August 2005, Pamela was admitted at this hospital.
Pamela went to hospital to deliver a baby, and she wanted to deliver the baby normally. And the doctor said, no, she cannot deliver normally. There would have to be a cesarean procedure. And she was convinced by the doctor, and in the process, Pamela died and the baby survived.
Pamela's death marked the beginning of a long journey for the devastated family, especially her mother, Buyiselwa Daweti, who was in the delivery room with her daughter. She has tirelessly pushed for the doctor responsible, Dani van der Walt, to be held accountable. It took the case over a decade to make its way to courts. In May last year, court proceedings finally began at the Witbank Magistrates Court in Mpumalanga. Evidence presented showed Pamela suffered cardiac arrest while in the intensive care unit shortly after she gave birth to her daughter Elisa Kanya. Pamela died due to the negligence of the doctor because he left her bleeding excessively for several hours after giving birth.
Specialist gynecologists who also gave evidence in court said that there was 100% chance of Pamela Daweti surviving, and it's only due to the doctor's mismanagement of the whole process and malpractice that she ended up being a victim.
Pamela's child, Lisa, survived and is now 11 years old. Buyiselwa, her grandmother, has raised her as her own child.
She didn't know that her mother died at birth until she was 4 years old. And they were going through a photo album, and then they started asking, who is this? And they were told, the mother, Buyiselwa, had to come out clear to say, no, this is your mother who died when you were born.
She is a very strong girl, because she manages to hide what happened to her. She puts a smile on her face. She acts as if, everything is normal, but deep inside, you could see, as I'm talking from the mother's perspective, you could see that deep inside she's hurting.
Sentencing is set for the 27th of July. The family also intends suing the doctor.
I think it would be just for the family to go for a lawsuit to compensate for that which Pamela could have done in the raising of her daughter and taking her to school, and also that she was just about to graduate at AVDA and she just died then. And to say she was just about to graduate means she could have been able to look after the daughter.
Various stakeholders of the healthcare sector have expressed concern over the growing number of medical malpractice suits against doctors in the public and private sector, calling it a crisis which is impacting negatively on the medical profession. One of the most vocal critics of medical malpractice suits has been Health Minister Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, who convened a medico-legal summit to discuss the issue and who is pushing for legislation to protect doctors against this litigation. Experts say that the private and public sector are both equally affected by the increased litigation. The minister says this is of grave concern.
The issue of litigation in healthcare system is happening globally. It's not something that is new. But at the present moment, it has jumped in leaps and bounds. That means it's completely, the rate of litigation and the amounts have just exploded, in our faces. So it is a crisis for the country, a very serious crisis. If the present claims are anything to go by, if they were to be paid, all of them, it will wipe off 25% of the total healthcare budget of the country.
At the Medico Legal Summit in 2015, it was revealed that the highest paid claim in 2008 was 14 million rands. A few years later, in 2013, a claim for an amount of 80 million rands was submitted. Currently, the Department of Health is dealing with a total of 60 billion rands in claims against the state in public hospitals. Dr. Ames Dye, director of the Steve Biko Center for Bioethics at Wits University's Health Sciences faculty, is a member of a special task team set up by the minister to look at medico-legal issues.
When you look at the situation in the public sector, what does this actually do? It denies access to health care, which is a constitutional right to the patient, because it is the funds that come in for the healthcare budget that's actually being used for these claims.
KwaMashu in KwaZulu-Natal, a township about 20 kilometers north of Durban. Here, a family is still coming to terms with grief from an unexpected loss. In May 2016, 21-year-old Nontle went into hospital to give birth to her baby boy. It was meant to be a happy time for the family. For fear of intimidation, the family has asked we hide their identity.
In first scan, you can see all those tiny things and all those scary things, and you can just see that that thing is inside you. Wow. Yeah, it was that feeling at first. After that, it grew. Everybody could see.
I was excited from the beginning, hearing that I'm going to be a father. Obviously, it's my first baby as well.
Nontle says her regular checkups showed that all was progressing well with the pregnancy. On the 16th of May, at 41 weeks, Nontle reported to the Mahatma Gandhi Hospital with some pain. She says doctors told her that they were going to induce her labor. She was in labor for 3 days when things took a turn for the worst.
I got fever, I was sweating, and I couldn't breathe properly. The CCGs were showing the baby was not okay. The baby's heart rate was not normal. At that time, they couldn't even find it. They were struggling to find the heartbeat. But they didn't send me to theatre, they didn't do anything.
She says that eventually she was taken to theatre for an emergency C-section.
When the baby came out, it had a scratch on its forehead, a cut on the forehead, and he only cried 2 times. After that, they told me the baby had a problem. The baby was not breathing properly, and the heartbeat was not beating right.
Soon after, she was told that her baby didn't survive.
In all of the doctors that I asked, all of them saw me after I've given birth. Nobody told me why the baby didn't make it. What was the cause? What was wrong with it in the first place?
Nontle and Sihle are devastated by the loss of their baby.
It is very painful from my side, I have to say. Losing a baby is not something easy to cope with.
They both feel that their baby died because of negligence and mismanagement of her labor by the hospital.
They neglected me, and they left me too long, and they were careless towards me and the baby. They could see the baby was in distress. They could see everything was not going right, but still they didn't do their job. They didn't check properly. They were not too careful. They didn't send me to theatre at the time that they had to send me.
Both parents want to take legal action against the hospital and doctors involved.
I don't want that hospital to pay. I don't know how, but they need to pay.
In response, the KZN Department of Health says they cannot comment on this case as they are prohibited from discussing patient information. Adele van der Walt is an attorney specializing in medical law. She explains what could have happened in a situation like this.
Starvation of oxygen and prolonged second stage of birth. This happens often in our state hospitals countrywide. Sometimes they're in active labour in the second stage that they don't attend to these ladies for 4 hours at a time. So then it's not possible to foresee that risk, to organise the doctor in time and to arrange a theatre. If the labour can't progress for whatever reason and there should be a caesarean section, that must be arranged in time. If they only do that once, there are limited time available, that may result in a baby's death or even brain damage.
Doctors in the private sector can purchase insurance to cover the costs of a lawsuit should they get sued. Most obstetricians in the private sector pay 650,000 rands a year, and this amount is set to rise to 850,000 rands this year. The Medical Protection Society, an indemnity cover provider to 30,000 doctors and dentists locally and to 300,000 worldwide, says people will continue to pay higher prices for health care or have fewer doctors to consult if the number of medical negligence cases continues to rise and benefit payouts mount.
Claims have increased in value about 14% year on year on average from 2009 to 2014. So there's an increase in the value of claims. Not only has there been an increase in the value of the claims, but there's also been an increase in the frequency of claims. So for the last 5 or 6 years since 2009, we've seen a long-term increase in the frequency of 27%. So both those factors play an important role in increasing the costs of litigation in South Africa. Not only are there more claims, but the claims are becoming substantially more expensive year on year.
If the litigation is inside the state hospital, then it's the government that must pay. And of course, we have to pay from the health budget. And we don't usually budget for this type of thing because we don't even know how much it is. We don't even know how what is coming. So it does also cause us problems because you are taking money. We should be running health services to go and pay for that.
Dr. Segi Naidu, a specialist gynecologist and obstetrician who is also honorary secretary of the South African Society of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, or SASOC, says that an increase in litigation against specialist doctors has driven up insurance costs from 190,000 rand per annum in 2009 to 650,000 rand currently. And then there are some doctors who are individually risked and they're paying much more.
This threatens the financial viability of private obstetric practice, leading to many doctors stopping practice or retiring early, and some doctors finding it not sustainable to continue the practice and close their practices. And there are some doctors that have given up practicing obstetrics mainly and have just resorted to only practicing office gynecology.
Dr. Naidu says this is having a monumental impact on the speciality.
We're finding that there will be fewer doctors wanting to specialize in what is perceived as a high-risk profession, because they would have fewer deliveries to start off with in practice, and it just becomes financially not viable for them to start off private practice. The consequences of this is that you're going to find that it increases the burden on where there will be fewer gynecologists practicing obstetrics, whilst women will continue to get pregnant and they will continue to need obstetric care. So fewer doctors taking care of a bigger population of patients, and that's going to further increase the risk. So the women who are pregnant are going to lose access to obstetric care. And the further consequence is that if they are not being able to be managed in private care, then they're going to be referred to state hospital care, which is already overburdened with the number of patients that they see in the state already.
Experts in the healthcare sector say that the increase in medical litigation since around 2009 is causing a national crisis. But is this a sign of a deteriorating healthcare system?
We know that there's three main areas in obstetrics and gynecology that is found to be lacking, in where there may be substandard care and there's an increase in claims. And that three main areas have been wrongful births, endoscopic injuries where we do minimally invasive surgery, with laparoscopic injuries, and thirdly with cerebral palsy, because that's been an increase in the frequency of the claims, and the quantum of the claims have been quite substantial, especially for cerebral palsy. We agree that we have to look at ourselves and look at the areas that we can improve our quality of care and to prevent substandard care.
Medical malpractice and negligence claims was not that much of an issue in the early 2000s. But what happened in 2008, we had the amendment of the Road Accident Fund Act come through, which capped all complaints. And what we saw then was lawyers who actually depended on their living from the Road Accident Fund had to change their trajectory. And so they got into our hospitals and saw the doctor as the soft target and moved that route. And, you know, there are reports of some unethical practices by doctors whereby they actually manage to get hospital files which disappear, and they end up with the original files. There's reports of collusion between them and staff in hospitals, you know, the administrative staff, who alert them where there could be a possible medical error and, you know, get them into the hospitals this way.
Dr. Martin Libos gets cases referred to him by attorneys, mostly representing plaintiffs or patients, but sometimes he is also consulted on behalf of defendants, being doctors and hospitals, to assess whether the claims have merit and whether there was negligence or malpractice or not. He admits an increase in medical malpractice litigations poses a challenge, but warns that there are rogue elements within the system, such as liars for hire.
It's a common term that doctors have coined, that if you want to sue a doctor, you can get a liar for hire. So you're getting an expert that will make up nonsense to sue the doctor, and he'll make up stuff. And it goes the other way too. In the defense of doctors, I have had cases where it is totally ludicrous what some of the defendants experts have come up with. So just as a brief example, there was a case, the details I'll spare you of, but the defense was that the patient had these complications due to the fact that there was an unknown condition. And when the expert was asked to elaborate on this, it was just undiagnosed. The reason they complicated because there must be a problem, but medical science cannot find out what that problem was. I mean, it is such rubbish that is written. And that incurs further costs because the lawyers are dependent on what their expert says. So if I say to my lawyers, I think that doctor was negligent because he should have picked up that the patient had an undiagnosed condition, they'll pursue this claim, and that's absolute rubbish. And it'll be proven later on, but then costs are incurred to the defendant's team or his malpractice insurance company will have to pay out for that. And that's where a lot of the problems are.
So what is the solution to the growing crisis of medical litigation?
We have made various attempts at looking at addressing the problem, and we think that there should be two approaches to this. And the first is to look at changing of the legislation and getting some legislative reform. So that we're approaching Department of Health for, and we will have discussions with the Ministry of Health, especially with regard to the statute of limitations in terms of bringing on a case. Secondly, to prevent vexatious claims from lawyers by introducing a certificate of merit. What I mean by that is that if there's a case that's being brought on, the lawyer first has to prove the case before it can go to court. If the case is not proven, then the lawyer has to carry the burden of the legal costs. So that will prevent these kind of increase in the frequency of frivolous kind of claims. The third aspect is that we want to introduce a arbitration and mediation council. So that means for two reasons. That if there is a case that you've got a senior obstetrician or a senior legal person on that committee that can arbitrate on that case. So there's quick access to the patient to bring on a case. And if there is negligence that is proven, the case is settled fairly quickly with reducing the legal costs. And if there is no case, that these cases will not go to court.
But does this offer hope for those who feel they have suffered at the hands of doctors?
I'm hoping the department will take this matter seriously. First, will attend this matter themselves, the Department of Health. And I'm hoping all those doctors can be accountable for all the wrong they did, so this won't happen to other people. Because if you look at this, if it happened to me, surely even today, even now, it's happening to another mother. She's losing her child. And she won't know the reason, she won't know why. And they'll get away with it.
I think it's very, very important that patients must remember that doctors are not God, even if doctors with their stethoscopes around their necks may give that impression. Doctors are not God, and medicine is not an exact science. And it is very important for doctors to remember to tell their patients that there is no guarantee. Doctors should never offer guarantees to their patients.